My name is Oyemika Maat, and this is the Embodied Lab one-day summit, Releasing Stress and Calming Anxiety Through Somatics. And the title for this particular session is The 3-Minute Reset, SOS Tools for In-the-Moment Anxiety with Anna Ferguson. Anna is a qualified counselor, coach, author, and integrative nervous system therapist. She passionately supports individuals to come home to themselves through harnessing the healing power of their unique physiology, body, and nervous system. Anna integrates her background in psychology and counseling with somatics, breathwork, polyvagal theory, and holistic practices to create a functional, effective, and practical therapeutic approach to anxiety, stress, and trauma. So, with that, welcome, Anna.
Thank you, Oyami, and welcome everyone. I'm super excited to be joining you today for the summit. Today's session is going to be an hour long, but it's going to be chock-a-block with lots of resources and tools. So I'm really, really excited for you to join me here, and the fact that you are either here live or with the replay. I just want you to acknowledge that showing up for yourself is really powerful. So thank you for being here. So as Oyami talked about, this is going to be reset tools for our nervous system for in the moment. So today is all about simplicity. You don't need hour-long meditations or resources to anchor yourself into when you're in kind of non-perfect conditions to find relief. Your body already holds that reset button. So you just need to know how to press that reset button. So I'm going to bring up my slides now so that we can dive into the session together. But there's going to be a few practices that we'll do together, and then we'll have plenty of time for a Q&A at the end as well. So we're going to go through micro resets and macro healing. We'll touch on sighing and breath. Sorry, we'll do a sighing and touch anchor for our first reset. We'll also look at gazing and orienting and naming 5 safe things, vocal toning with grounded feet, and then we're going to put these all together to create your own personal reset ritual, and then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for a bit of a Q&A and reflection and group integration session. So let's start off with micro resets versus macro healing. Apologies if I stumble over my words a little bit. It is 6 o'clock in the morning. I've just woken up, so I'm a little bit out of sorts still. So I'm just coming together. So when we think about nervous system, I want you to think of our nervous system like a battery almost. So if you think of your phone, often when our phone gets to 1%, before we get to charge it, we're freaking out. We're in that panic mode. We need to get it on charge immediately. So we're often putting our phone on charge before that point so that we have enough battery power so we can call people in case of an emergency, so we can utilize that resource. And I want you to think of your nervous system as the same way. Often we do the same to ourselves. We leave ourselves on that 1% battery charge. We push through, we power through, only to stop when we hit that burnout, panicked, anxious state. So I want you to think about how we can get better at topping up our battery and charge throughout the day. So when we look at macro healing, I want you to think of this on that deeper level. So it's the trauma work, it's the attachment therapy, it's inner child work. These things take time, they take presence, they take attunement and safety, and they're really, really powerful. But they're not always as accessible to us in the moment. When the fire is burning deep inside of us, it's very, very difficult to kind of have this macro kind of view of what is occurring to us and start to put things together. So when we're in that middle of the meltdown, we want to look at how we can utilize our body in conjunction with our mind to create micro resets. So these are really fast, short, and accessible state shifting tools that help interrupt that spiral and create a shift in our physiology and therefore in our state. So we want these to be really, really practical tools. You don't need to have a therapist in the room or a quiet retreat space. We want them to be kind of accessible no matter what state or environment or context that you're in as well. So we need both of these things in order to create capacity, so where our nervous system can expand and become more resilient to hold more, so that when we do encounter stresses in our day-to-day life, they don't kick us into that anxious panic state immediately. And we also need safety, so that felt sense of safety. So cognitively, we can know that we are safe, as in we are not in immediate danger. There's nothing in our environment that is potentially threatening to us. But physiologically, we might be responding with alarm bells that something is still kind of causing a sense of disease in our body, right? So what we are trying to do with our body is use our physiology to create that felt sense of safety, to down-regulate that mobilization response and sympathetic nervous system. So today is going to be all about mini sips of regulation, these micro resets that are going to be like gentle nudges towards safety. And over time, they help build our capacity. They send the message to our brain that I can handle this, I'm not stuck, I have options, and that in itself can be extremely healing. What I will also say is these practices, whilst they can be used in the moment, it's very important that we understand how open our nervous system is to learning new things in different states. So when we're in that ventral vagal state of safety and calm, we are actually open to learning new things. We can take on new information. When we're in that sympathetic mobilized state, our brain is not trying to learn any new tools or resources or techniques in that state. And this is because it's harnessing everything that it currently has and what it has known in order to maintain survival in that moment. So taking on new information is not really at the top of the pecking order when we're in that mobilization state. So I want you to practice these resources or find micro moments where you are in that ventral vagal state, or at least not in a highly, highly anxious state, so that you can start to adopt these practices so that they do become accessible to you when you are in that state of panic. So we're going to dive straight into our practices. The first practice is going to be our sighing and touch anchor practice. So I'm going to invite everyone to practice along with me. All right, so sighing is a really natural built-in mechanism that our body has in order to create an expansion of our parasympathetic nervous system. So every 5 minutes or so, we naturally sigh in order to expand our lungs and create a full vacuum in our lungs. Now, we kind of do this subconsciously. We don't actually notice that we're sighing all the time every 5 minutes or so. But what this does is it creates that vacuum in our lungs. It activates our baroreceptors and it slows down our heart rate, lowers our blood pressure, and allows us to feel calm. So we can kind of harness this natural process that occurs subconsciously and bring it into the conscious realm and utilize sighing as a technique to downregulate our nervous system throughout the day as well. So touch coupled with this sighing, especially when self-directed, with intention, activates our interoceptive sense, so our ability to understand what is occurring within our body and your body's ability to feel itself, to notice its sensations accurately. And this reinforces a sense of safety and connection as well. So this pairing between our sighing and touch is really subtle but powerful, and you can do it anywhere. Often it's the first thing that people kind of notice when they're finally letting go, is that they have this sigh of relief, right? But we can do this in a really subtle way that allows us to create points of connection to our ventral vagal nervous system throughout the day. So I invite you now to either sit or stand comfortably. And maybe we'll roll out our shoulders together as we come into the space. I definitely slept on my shoulder funny last night, so one's a little tighter than the other. All right, so I just want you to loosen your jaw now. Maybe give yourself a bit of a massage. So we'll loosen our jaw, roll our shoulders back. So for the sigh, what I'm going to show you first, and then we can do it all together, is that we're going to inhale once through the nose, then we're going to inhale again like a little top-up breath through the nose, and then an exhale through the mouth. So what this looks like is an inhale, inhale, exhale. And let's do it all together. So we inhale, inhale, exhale. Inhale, inhale, exhale. Now, this is called the physiological sigh. So it's mimicking that physiological sigh that we do every 5 minutes or so. And you can have a play around with that at your own pace. Inhale, inhale, exhale. And then when you are feeling comfortable and you feel like you've got the hang of that, then we can add a touch anchor in. So this can be anything for you. I really encourage you to explore what feels most comforting to you. So for example, some people may enjoy putting their hand on their heart. For me, I like to hold my shoulder when I'm feeling anxious. There's a sense of protection that comes from this state, a sense of containment. For you, that may be holding your hands or pressing your hands together or clasping your hands or placing your hands on your thighs. Whatever, just have it explore now and just find different spaces that feel most comfortable for you to touch. So for me, I'm going to hold my shoulder, and at the same time, you can use obviously different forms of pressure or touch. And then we can practice our physiological side at the same time. So inhale, inhale, and exhale. Inhale, inhale, and exhale. All right. One more time. Let's do one more. Inhale, inhale, and exhale. So as you can see, it's a very, very simple practice. But what I have found, especially when with the physiological side, is that the more that I was able to anchor myself throughout the day at moments in time, especially if you are going through your busy day and you are on your laptop or you're working, having those micro moments of anchoring yourself, of intentionally and consciously bringing to the surface a process that our body already uses to downregulate, has been an absolute game changer in allowing myself to kind of create anchor points throughout the day without having to create a huge reset ritual for myself. It's also really subtle, so we can do these techniques in front of other people, and they to varying degrees depending on how big or how small you make it, without other people really noticing. So if you are in the context of work or meetings and you can practice your physiological side with subtle touch, it can be a really powerful tool that's not too overexpressive as well. So I'm just going to check the chat. So I love the idea of having control over a sigh. I love that too. It's very relaxing. Sigh with the pursed lips, not yeah. So I personally do my exhale with the pursed lips, as this allows us to extend our exhale even more, which is going to push our parasympathetic more online. So our parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for our exhalation. And the more that you can press your exhale through pursed lips, you give yourself tactile stimulation through your lips, it's really going to enhance that parasympathetic response that we create as well. When we do sound, this can be a bit activating for the nervous system. So you can play around with different sounds, different ways in which you're exhaling, but you can tailor it to the specific kind of state that you find yourself in or what you're wanting to achieve as well. Very calm, expanding the lungs, deepening the breathing, anchoring felt comforting and stabilizing. I like hugging both my shoulders. I love that. I yawned after the first in and out breath, a beautiful sign our parasympathetic nervous system is coming online. Held and present. Thanks for the explanation. You're very welcome. Yes, yawning every time. And I'm sure a yawn will escape my lips at some point here, so it may be contagious that we'll all either be asleep or very deep in our parasympathetic state by the end of this. So that is our first mini reset. Micro reset, I should say. As you can see, super simple. I like to keep things as effective and accessible as possible so that when we are in the moment, we don't have to think too hard, and you can practice outside of those moments as well, so that when you are in the fire, when the fire is burning, that you can go, I know exactly what to do. That's going to help me down regulate this system as well. And just the last one in the chat, I learned recently that if you touch somewhere away from the vagus nerve, like hands, that it can be easier for people who don't like to be touched. Absolutely. So if you are touch sensitive, if you have any sensitivities when it comes to sensory input, finding kind of neutral spots that may not be as over stimulatory for you. So the hands and feet can be a good way to explore touch as well. Yes, in a trauma healing course, it said that yawning is a sign of releasing. Yes, absolutely. So yawning is a parasympathetic process. It's governed by our vagus nerve and our parasympathetic nervous system. And it is essentially just a reflection that we're in that kind of state that's winding down, that's business as usual, that's rest and digest. While we're getting the slides up, I'll just talk about the next practice that we go into as well, because the slides aren't super important when it comes to this, but they will have instructions on it as well. So the reason why I love to use our eyes and our particularly shifting our like visual cortex to take in more of our environment is because when we're in that mobilized sympathetic state, what happens is we become very, very honed in on a singular focus that is in front of us. So what I mean by that is that our vision actually gets greater, as in we can see more clearly, but it is coming into a singular focal point. And so what that means is that we're very, very good at understanding what's directly in front of us or what we're turning our vision to in order to keep ourselves safe. But we often block out what is going on around us in order to just maintain our safety by understanding what's in front of us. So the opposite of that sympathetic, highly focused state would be a wider visual field and understanding what is going on around us. So orienting invites that opposite state, a gentle widening of awareness. And this allows us to take in more of what is happening within our surroundings, in our environment, and identifying things that potentially feel novel or safe or neutral to us allows our brain's natural threat scanning system, so that process of neuroception where we're understanding what's safe, what's dangerous, or what's neutral to us, to confirm whether or not we are actually in danger or not. So this can send cues of safety to the nervous system and begins to shift us into more of that ventral vagal state. So I want you to, first and foremost, you're going to get yourself nice and comfortable. It can be good to have something like textural to help keep you grounded as well, if you feel like that is helpful for you. You can, when you're naming things, when we get to the point in which you're naming things, you can either say them aloud or simply note them. But I want you to kind of extend your gaze on those objects for a little bit longer than the other objects around you. The key is to avoid any sort of rushing. Let your gaze settle as you are going through this process and really take in the kind of sensory stimulation that you are getting, whether that is sound, smell, different colors, the light or the texture from different things as well. So let's try this together. I'm going to just get you to allow your eyes to just gently drift around your space. I'm just going to do a full 360. See all the way behind you. If you've got a table, maybe look under the table. Take in everything in your space as much as you possibly can. And I want you to just, as you are gazing around the room, I want you to allow your eyes to land on something that kind of seems interesting or novel or generates any sort of emotion that veers towards the positive end of the spectrum. So for example, my husband just brought a coffee into my room, so my eyes are landing on my coffee right now. And we're just going to let each object land. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. It doesn't need anything from you. Just noticing as you land on each object. So moving from the first neutral object to the next neutral or positive object in your room. And I want you just to remind yourself as you are noticing things in your room that this is my room. I am not in danger. I am allowed to feel safe. And now that you've had a really good look around, you've observed lots of different objects in your room, I just want you to let your eye gaze settle on one of those objects for a moment. And just let your gaze kind of blur out. You know, when you hyper focus and then you allow your gaze to soften and blur out as if you can't take in any more. And as you are in this state of just allowing your eyes to relax entirely, I want you to just to notice the temperature of the room. Maybe you notice a subtle scent in the air. Adding these layers of sensory awareness bring you back into the body and back into the moment. Maybe you can hear something calming in the background. Just noticing. And then whenever you're ready, you can bring your gaze back to the center of the room, back to the center of your body. And I always like to finish off my eye gazing practice with a bit of an eye stretch. So I want you to move your eyes as if you are looking, and you can do this with your eyes closed, as if you are looking at the back of your head. So turning your eyes to look at the back of your head. And you can feel that stretch in your eyes. And then whenever you're ready, just allowing your eyes to come back to center. And taking a nice deep breath. Maybe inviting some movement back into the body. These are, like I said, very, very simplistic ways in which we can reset, but they are most powerful when we are kind of consistently utilizing them at touch points throughout the day, right? So again, if you are someone who is looking at a computer or you're focusing on your work in front of you throughout the day, our eyes become very focused in on this singular point, and this doesn't allow us to actually take in that sensory information. So if you're someone that finds yourself in flight response, so I've got to get out of here, like when you're in social situations, orienting and shifting your gaze is really helpful to take in the whole context of your environment and allows you to feel that sense of safety from your environment as well. And it also means that we are able to kind of shift our musculature of our eyes that are holding our eyes in place to relax as well. So hopefully this has resonated with you as well, this practice. And what I will say also is we did the first practice of the physiological side, and then we moved on to our eye gazing practice. For you, one of those might have felt really, really good, and one of them may have not hit home for you. So I invite you to take what you would like and leave what you don't. Because not everything is going to work for everyone, and not everything should work for everyone. So what works for you is going to be really, really unique to you, but also take what I share with you and make it your own, right? So maybe you do like doing your exhale for the physiological side with it, and that feels really nourishing for you. So I invite you to play around with all of the different practices and make them your own as well. Just checking in the chat. Loving when we are having awareness about what we can do to bring our nervous system regulated. Thank you very much. So it was interesting to take in my home with a different perspective. Absolutely. And you know, I feel like sometimes depending on the state of your nervous system, like if I do that exercise, I'm like, oh no, I'm like, my house is quite dirty. I need to give it a clean. Like I don't want to observe it too much, you know? And so it really depends on like the state that we are actually in, and how we can take in information. And so that's a really good sign that when we can be curious about our space without getting stuck in the information that we're receiving from it, it's a good sign that our nervous system is in that ventral vagal state. Yeah. Many objects had triggering thoughts attached if I thought about them instead of just seeing the objects. Absolutely. And there is a level of detachment that has to come from curiosity almost, right? So we have to remove our prior experiences to a certain degree, to come at it from this open perspective of, what is this about, as opposed to what have I experienced with this object. Now, that's not for everything, but certain photos or scents may elicit really strong emotional responses as well. So I really, really encourage you to practice and play around with, again, what feels best for you. If there are a lot of triggers in this context in your home environment, but maybe when you're out in nature, observing and being able to do this eye gazing exercise elicits a very, very different experience, right? So it's all about your context in moment to moment and being able to shape that to the state of your nervous system that you are in as well. So moving forward into our third slide, vocal toning with grounded feet. So vocal toning is one of my favorite exercises to utilize. It's a very visceral experience that we can create with our body, because sound is a really, really powerful tool that activates our vagus nerve. So essentially, our vagus nerve runs down the left and the right sides of our neck. So when we utilize our vocal cords, this sends vibrations towards our vagus nerve as well. And our vagus nerve is also really responsible, partially responsible for our facial expressions and our tone of voice and the sound that we make as well. So how we use our tongue. So when we utilize sound and creating sound with our mouth, this can really help stimulate our vagus nerve, which is more than 75% parasympathetic fibers, which gives us a really beautiful way to access our ventral vagal nervous system. So when we do slow, low, and sustained sounds like tones of voice, so humming or voo sounds, this creates really internal vibrations that gently activate that parasympathetic nervous system and can send signals of safety. Now, when you pair this with something like grounding, so barefoot grounding or putting your feet on the floor or laying flat on the floor, or even just noticing the back of your body, this can really help anchor us as we utilize sound. So what I will always give full disclosure, sometimes sound, especially the VU sound or lots of vibrations, can be quite triggering. So I want you to just practice really small amounts to start off with, as in play around with the sound, play around with the level of volume, the tone of your voice, so whether it's higher pitched or lower pitched, play around with how long you exhale for. For me, I personally like to use a lower sounding exhale and VU sound, and I like to feel the vibrations in my ears. This is when I start to know that I'm really hitting that sweet spot of activating my vagus nerve. But for you, that might be too much. So I just want you to play around as we are going through this. And just notice if your body does become activated or you're moving into that triggered state, then maybe we just want to put this resource aside for now and you can focus on grounding instead. So if you are feeling activated, I really want you to just focus on how can I create a tether between myself and the earth and feel that gravitational pull between the two. I would invite everyone again for our last practice to just sit comfortably. You can stand, but we want to have both feet on the floor for this one. So if you need to, if you've got short little legs like I do, you might need to scooch forward on the chairs and have your feet flat on the ground. We can place one hand on our belly and one hand on our chest, but wherever feels most connected for you again. So that might be holding you in a hug, however it feels safest for you. We're going to inhale slowly through our nose, and then on the exhale, you can either hum or you can make a vibrate. I want you to think of a vibrational sound. So even like a bee or a foghorn, like a VU sound, whatever feels most accessible for you. So I'll give you an example of what this looks like. So we inhale through the nose and then exhale. Ooh. And I want you to have a little play around with that. That feels good for me, but we'll go inhale together now. So ready, inhaling through the nose, exhaling. Repeat again when you have finished your exhale. Inhale and exhale. Just taking a deep breath here, checking in with your nervous system. See if you can feel that energy moving through your body from the vibrations. And as you're here, I want you to focus on that vibration and resonance that you may still be feeling through your body, but just bring your presence back to that tether of your feet as well. Can you notice when you bring attention to your feet, does that vibrational feeling change? Ooh. Can you send that sound all the way down to your feet? Can you feel the tingling in your toes? And just take a moment to experience and practice and see what that feels like in your personal nervous system. I'll just give you maybe 10 seconds more. And whenever you're ready, maybe we give our feet a bit of a stomp to come back into the room. You can flutter your eyes back open. And again, we're taking that room around us, just noticing what is in your immediate vicinity. And I would love to hear what, for that vibrational feeling, like where in your body did you feel that most? Was it purely your lips or your throat? Did you feel it in your ears maybe? Could you send it down to your chest or your toes? And some of you might have felt your chest soften or your belly relax. Some might have felt more like a stillness coming around for them. Others may not have felt much at all, and that's okay too, right? So the nervous system is going to respond over time, and all of these practices are really a relationship building exercise that we create with our body, right? So the first time that we do everything, we're always a little bit unsure, especially if it's novel or new. But the more that we practice it, the more we can kind of play, right? So if you ever met someone and you're like, I'm not sure who you are, but then in 10 minutes time, you're being silly and you're being your usual self, right? And so it's the same with our nervous system practices. The first time there's a little trepidation. We're not quite sure whether it's going to work or not. But as we keep practicing, we build this really beautiful relationship in which we can let down our guard and allow these practices to kind of hold space for us as well. So belly and around my spine felt amazing to be a new, maybe a new favorite practice. I love that. I was able to feel in the soles of my feet towards the end of the hum. I feel like I can feel the soles of my feet still tingling a little bit. Chest, ears, and hands, absolutely chest, tongue, and hands, shoulder and back chills with nausea, which is strange. Yeah, so nausea is going to be an interesting one because this can be from sympathetic mobilization, as in like when we start to enter into that state, our digestive system essentially slows down. And so whatever food may be in our belly is going to either sit in our belly or want to be expelled from our system. So that can cause feelings of nausea, or it could be your metabolic system coming online from you changing your breathing pattern as well. So it's just about you kind of understanding your own body signals and figuring out what's just that discomfort of a shift in the nervous system occurring, and where maybe it's a nudge saying, hey, maybe don't utilize this exercise and choose something else. Jaw, upper chest. Thanks for encouraging experimentation. Always, always, always. I love being the mad scientist, and I encourage you to be the mad scientist as well. I was able to send the vibration down to my chest. It was in my head. I really liked the practice, but I did start crying. Again, a beautiful sign that the parasympathetic nervous is coming online. So thank you for sharing. And what a beautiful like exaltation and expression of our nervous system, right? Crying is a deeply, deeply nourishing experience that actually has a true physiological response, right? So when we express emotional tears, they actually have studies to show that it releases cortisol, as in like we're getting rid of cortisol from our body through our tears. So if you're in a stress state and you start crying, which is something that I do often, I get very overwhelmed and then you cry and you're like, I don't even know why I'm crying, but it feels really good. This is our body getting rid of excess cortisol as well. So a beautiful, beautiful response to this practice. A bit late to loudly hear. I'll try the practice again tomorrow. Absolutely. I use in instead of vu, and that's more vibratory in my skull and chest. And I tried it on different pitches. I love that. I'm not a music person, so that's gone above my head, but I love that you're practicing. And definitely, like when you change the pitch, it's going to change where the vibration hits. And it's going to change the way in which you experience. So depending on the state and what you are wanting to achieve as your kind of outcome, you can change your vocal intonations as well. Tickles my bottom lip too much, so I hummed instead. Yes, sometimes it's too much. Sometimes it's too intense. Yawning also occurs during these exercises. Yes, absolutely. So our parasympathetic nervous coming online. I wonder if wearing eyeglasses impacts the effectiveness of nervous system regulation that use the eyes, because eyeglasses don't give a 360 view unless you move your head with your eyes. Absolutely. And depending on what you're using them for. So for example, like if you need your glasses to see, then taking your glasses off may not be helpful for the viewing exercise. But if you can take your glasses off so that you're getting exposed to natural light, that's going to be the best. But turning your head functionally with your eyes is going to be the most down regulating to your nervous system. And what I mean by that is when we just kind of do this, what do we do? Like, how often do we look over our shoulder when we're just like in a nice, relaxed state? It's normally like, ugh, something's back there, right? So we want to send the signal that actually there isn't anything back there. We turn our whole body with our head as well, right? So there is benefit to turning our whole body, to moving our whole physiology to make sure that it's taking in all the sensory information from behind us as well. Definitely release, but I yawned, a true release engaging the parasympathetic nervous system. And what we might do now is kind of move into our next section of actually putting these together. And this is going to be a simple practice in which I encourage you to maybe just journal this out. While we move into the last little bit before we get into the Q&A. And just, I saw in the chat, I experimented with plugging my ears while humming and it was so different. Yeah, absolutely. So if anyone knows Brahmari Pranayama, so bee breathing, you can also do it where you plug your ears like this and you hum like a bee. And you can create a different experience as well. So definitely play around with that too. All right, so creating your personal reset ritual. So I want you to, we've gone through 3 practices here. Some of them are kind of like dual practices, as in with like coupled touch with physiological sigh. I want you to start to think about, out of those practices and the components of those practices, which one of those had elicited the most potent kind of physiological response, that shift into that parasympathetic state. And you can just jot this down for yourself and just think about past experiences and what works best for you, what feels best for you, what you think is going to resonate most for you in your day-to-day life as well. So the reason why I also talk about just like making this make sense for you is because it has to feel doable and meaningful for you. And you don't need to have this like perfect morning ritual. It just has to be a really simple pattern that is actually going to be utilized, right? So if you make it a really big blown out experience for yourself, we often get over that pretty quickly. But if you can do these practices, like if you are flicking on the kettle to make a cup of tea or coffee while you're waiting for the kettle to boil, then you are doing these practices, right? So you have the option of stacking all 3 into a mini circuit. And so that's why I wanted you to break it up into the components of what you have tried, what felt best for you. So maybe it's the physiological side with the touch, anchor, and grounding, for example. And I want you to think about the moments in your day that you most generally notice that feel kind of like trigger points for you, right? So for me, that's first thing in the morning when I wake up. I often find that I just need to take that moment to myself to like hold myself, because I co-sleep with my baby, and while I love holding her all night, it is nice to also feel held by someone else or by myself as well in the morning. So having that anchor point of touch for me is really important, right? And then I think about the rest of my day. Normally at lunchtime after I've been working, this will be where I would do another regulation reset. And then maybe towards the end of my day before I make dinner and before bed. So there's kind of those points in my day where I notice, hey, I need a moment in time to reset and regulate. And that is when I would use these regulation rituals. So the reason why I want you to create a daily practice around this with multiple touch points is that familiarity is going to be the most accessible thing to you when you are in moments of high anxiety. Because as we talked about, the nervous system is not going to be open to learning new things when you're in a highly anxious state. But when you're in that safe state, it is going to be open to taking in new information, integrating it so it is accessible for you as well. All right. All right, so I want you to name your ritual. I want you to explore what worked best for you. It's just making your own space in which you are very intentional about what you are doing and how you are doing it, right? Anything that didn't feel good for you, get rid of it. Doesn't need to be a part of it. So what is the time of day or situation when I most need a reset? Which practices felt best or most grounding to me? And can I give my reset a name? So it's kind of this fun thing that I know, oh, I'm going to hit the pause button, right? And other people don't need to know what you're talking about, but you can duck off to the bathroom, do your regulation ritual, maybe have your calm circuit, whatever it is, give it a name, makes it more real, makes it repeatable, feels like your own little system and process that you have in place. And when you name your reset, you claim it. So you're giving your nervous system a signal that it knows, it recognizes, and is familiar as well. Yeah. Yeah. I should have shown you this earlier so that you have these resources, but these are just some questions that you can journal on and have a play around with. I do recommend watching back the replay as well, because it is sometimes easier to have that guided version of experiencing it if you're having trouble kind of accessing it as well. So now I'm going to open up the Q&A. When I am intentionally breathing, it feels like my breath gets caught at the top of the inhale, like I can't take in the last of the air to make it a deep breath, full stop. That happening increases my anxiety in the moment. Is there a particular reason this is happening, and is there something I can do about it? It reminds me of having an asthma attack as a kid. I think I can feel that feeling that you're experiencing as well. And what I would say is that when we experience anxiety, or if you have been in a state of mobilization or chronic anxiety for a period of time, what happens is it changes our breathing pattern, right? So we move from, if you observe a baby sleeping or breathing, their little bellies are going in and out, in and out, in and out, right? But over time, as stress compounds and we gain more and more challenges in life, or we experience trauma, our breathing often changes, so it becomes higher up in our chest. So we're not actually expanding our belly out, and we're not creating a full vacuum in our lungs. So it may be that your diaphragm is having a hard time relaxing and opening up so that you're able to actually take in that full breath. So when we take in that full breath, essentially, if I just tilt my computer screen down, we actually want our belly to expand when we inhale, right? So what this looks like is we breathe in and our belly goes out, and we breathe out and our belly goes back towards our spine. So we inhale, belly goes out, we exhale, belly goes back towards the spine. But if we are having trouble expanding our diaphragm and expanding our, like stretching all of that out, then it may be difficult for you to inhale, and you're finding that there's like this kind of resistance at that top of that breath as well. So the best thing that you can do for that is to practice that diaphragmatic breathing as much as possible. Lying on the floor is going to be the easiest way to do that. If you can find something that has like a bit of weight to it, so like a heat pack or a book to put on your belly, and just practice moving that book or heat pack up and down, up and down, up and down for a period of time. So hopefully that helps. If the physiological side doesn't work and one is in a safe environment, would an actual sigh just be as useful? Yes, absolutely. They're the same mechanisms. One is just us creating the sigh, like externally thinking about making a sigh, or one is just an actual sigh. An actual sigh is going to be a sign that your parasympathetic nervous system is coming online. Looking inside to the back of my skull is hard on my eyes, yet maybe from looking at the screen, I get lots of eye attention, more ways to help with that. So you can do the same exercise where you close your eyes, so there's less strain on your eyes, and you turn your eyes to the left. Hold it there for a few seconds, turn your eyes to the right, and you hold it there for a few seconds, and then practice going back. So you're really going to be practicing stretching the musculature of what is holding your eyes in place, and just practicing like with small increments, because if you turn your eyes to the left and the right and the back and it feels really straining, then it can kind of have that counteractive effect. So maybe just moving your eyes slightly to the right, slightly to the left, slightly back, starting small and then building up. If we have let sympathetic activation get too intense, is there a practice that meets our nervous system on that more intense level, then walks it back down? Absolutely. So what I will say is that if you are in a highly, highly anxious state, highly mobilized state, you have all of this energy moving around your body, mini sip, movement is going to be your best friend, right? So can you find a movement that matches the intensity of your energy? For me, that is always going to be something like shaking or dancing. So if I'm in a state of like highly panicked, even sometimes before I come to present, I notice my hands start shaking. So how do I amplify that movement and shake my hands out and move my body in a way? Movement is always going to be the kind of action that your nervous system is wanting you to take when you are in that mobilized state, right? So it's giving you all this energy to move. How can you then utilize that? Now, on the other side of that, for like panic attacks and like really big anxiety attacks, things like cold, like you can also use like acute cold exposure, like ice packs on the side of the neck to the vagus nerve or the chest. Just be sure to wrap them up so you don't give yourself ice burns. You can also put ice on your wrist, so there is kind of like a direct line between your wrist and your vagus nerve as well. So this will help calm you down. You can also imagine biting into a lemon, so sour and salty. So if you imagine biting into a lemon, like your mouth immediately salivates. And so this is going to kickstart that kind of bottom-up feedback that we're not in fight or flight response, because when we're in sympathetic state, our salivary glands, stop production of saliva. So if we can kickstart that process, we send this biofeedback that actually we're not in this sympathetic state. Yeah. So you can either have sour lollies or you can imagine biting into a lemon as well. Hopefully that helps. All right, we've got a few more questions. How does one find and activate their diaphragm for deep breathing when you have difficulty feeling into your body because of trauma or disconnect from the body? It can be really helpful to have someone to guide and support you for this, right? Especially if there are trigger points there in different parts of your body, especially if you're having difficulty accessing different parts of your body without becoming dysregulated or feeling unsafe. But what I would say is that your diaphragm is a big muscle, right? So it works like a vacuum like this. So it pulls down when we inhale and it comes back up when we exhale. And it's going to sit just below your rib cage. So for you, I would just practice with something completely neutral. Maybe you do have like a book that you really enjoyed that has felt comfortable to you, or maybe you have just like a blanket that you can pop on your belly. And just see if you can make that blanket or book move up and down with each breath, right? So just doing a small practice of how can I see something visually, how can I tactilely feel something, and how can I start to create that connection between the mind and body, that this is safe for me to do this, but this process is occurring kind of naturally as well. So hopefully that helps, Heather. When you ask how something feels in our personal nervous system, where would you suggest placing attention? Is there a physical location to focus awareness? everyone is going to be different, right? So for a lot of people, I think it would depend on like if you had an expression of symptoms, for example. So for example, if you were feeling really anxious and you had this really overt experience of your heartbeat increasing and your heart racing, right? Maybe you notice a shift in your heart rate to be slower and more regulated, right? So the response from your nervous system can be subtle, it can be big. It doesn't always make sense where you're experiencing it. And this is a process of just becoming aware of the body and aware of different sensations. If you're really having a hard time kind of pinpointing the process of what's happening in your body, you can always just place your hand on your heart, right? Just always place your hand on your heart if that feels safe for you. You can always place your hand on your shoulder if that feels safe for you. And you just practice. And as you get better at practicing this, you will notice more and more communication from your body as well. I heard recently that vibrating the vagus nerve in the way we did today releases our happy chemicals. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I haven't read the study myself, but I know that serotonin and dopamine and oxytocin are all going to interplay with our co-regulation capacity. And our vagus nerve is very, very it's basically how we co-regulate with other humans. So we're interdependent species. It is how we're able to actually mirror people's facial expressions, smile at other people, change our tone of voice, all of those different types of things. And so it would make sense that these hormones is deeply connected to our vagus nerve, and activating our vagus nerve is going to, in turn, release these hormones in our body, for sure. What would you recommend if anxiety is overwhelming and breathing deeply feels inaccessible? If you are in a panicked or having an anxiety attack, I do not recommend breathing deeply. I recommend starting off with acute cold or sour and salty. So starting that biofeedback from your body to up towards your brain to let you know that you're not in this sympathetic state. They're going to be the fastest ways to downregulate. And then once you have kind of put a little bit of a damp on that fire, then we can use breath work or breathing patterns. But if you try to do deep breathing when you're in a very activated state, you're probably going to throw a whole heap of fuel onto that fire and make it even bigger and a bit more intense for yourself as well. All right, how many and the questions keep coming. All right. One of my greatest fears is that I'll be stuck in an elevator and have an anxiety attack. These tools are helpful. Do you have any additional suggestions or why this happens? I also need to have a door or window open when I'm in a closed space. I feel like I can't breathe, which is psychological. I want to get over this fear. Yeah, so it sounds like something has occurred in which your body or your nervous system has felt trapped and wanted to get out. And it sounds very remiss of the flight response, in which you have to have like an exit strategy, but that's definitely something that's going to be highly personalized to you, that you should definitely look at how you're being supported to work with these different experiences in your personal life as well. How do I get the vibration down all along the vagus nerves? It seems to get confined in head and neck. It's just playing with different volumes, different sounds, different ways in which you're kind of using your voice. So play around with like really high pitch, play around. I find like low pitch, I can kind of send it lower in my body, whereas high pitch stays up higher in my head. And that may be different for everyone as well. So just play around. Doesn't matter if the eyes are open or closed. Nope, it does not matter. It's whatever is most comfortable for you. I definitely find that having my eyes closed seems to be a more relaxing experience than it does if I have my eyes open. So it's just a matter of preference and what your body kind of responds best to as well. I'm just tipping water all over myself, so that's me in a nutshell. So the last question is, what happens if the breath gets stuck in the chest and doesn't reach the belly? Will the book exercise help with this? Yeah. So this is a really good signal that your diaphragm is it's not being activated as you're breathing, right? So we're just breathing up here. And we're seeing all this movement up in our chest. But what we want to do is activate our lower diaphragm. So again, the book exercise will help. It gives you something visual. It helps if there's weight. Like as soon as you put any pressure on that body part, it's much easier for you to think, I have to push this pressure away from my body, right? And that helps kind of send the signals and kickstart that connection that you're activating your diaphragm. This process takes time, especially if we've been chest breathing for a really long time, right? So just give yourself a lot of time to practice the diaphragmatic breathing. All right, last question. Tips for grounding when in some place like the dental chair and fear of dentistry. This is a tough one. So obviously, I love things like touch or proprioceptive input. So proprioceptive sensory input is weighted input for the body. It's how the fascia and the joints understand where your body is in space, and it's extremely calming and organizing on the brain and the body. So even if you're in like a dental chair, you could do like a palm push that creates that kind of pressure on your joints. You could also do like a thigh push where you push your hands against your thighs. You could also, I'm just thinking of other ways in which you get proprioceptive sensory input. You could also do like grounding techniques where you're like moving and counting your fingers. So this is something that I do when I'm trying to fall asleep sometimes, is I count along with my fingers. And go back and forth like that. So you've got to, even when I'm not looking at my hands, it's very difficult. So you're kind of practicing doing that. Anything that kind of creates sensation, creates a bit of pressure, and in those moments, I would encourage some form of distraction as well, right? Because you don't want to be wholly present with what is occurring if that is really triggering to you. All right, I think we did it. I think we answered all the questions.